This study, as we've discovered, has sections on the northeast, the southeast, the northwest, on a scale of 10 or 20 or 30 years, which is well within the planning reach of many metropolitan and state governments.
So I think this is where we need to be focusing our attention, is regional and sectoral, both documentation of impacts, but also models that talk about what's likely down the road. And that's where the scientific community is headed. The question is, how do we get this out fast enough, number one, and number two, if we get it out to everybody, is that going to be fast enough, given that the planet is changing so rapidly? And so we're really playing catch up for a whole suite of reasons, both the denial, the misrepresentation, the mischaracterization, the confusion, dissemination of sowing doubt. There's a lot of catch-up, but we don't have a lot of time, and yet there's still a huge amount of work to be done.
Well, one thing I noticed about the cover of this is that it shows the lower 48, and we were talking just now at ABC News to Tony Leisowitz up at Yale, who's done a number of studies and found that the first image that comes to people's mind when you ask them about this looming catastrophe, the word is being used increasingly by scientists in the open, is melting ice and polar bears. And what you have down here is hard data about what's already happened in the lower 48. Right. As far as the United States is concerned. All right, well, let's switch over for a moment to your main scientific specialty, the oceans. You call it what, the evil twin, the other?
The equally evil twin.
The equally evil twin. Give us
climate change and ocean acidification.
Well, I must say, as a journalist, when we began looking at this, I became, in some ways, a little bit more concerned about the fact that we might have something here that's more frightening psychologically, because we know even less about it, other than that rising acidification is associated by the paleoclimatologists with massive extinction events in the deep past, rather rapid ones, and so that's not good news. Give us your quick take on what we need to know that we don't know yet and don't really think about daily yet about this other evil twin.
Well, I think ocean acidification is one of the surprises. It wasn't something that was really predicted. And just as a placeholder, I think there are likely other surprises down the road, and we need to be cognizant of those. As it's hard to make decisions based on that, but this is an example of one that we didn't really anticipate.
What's some of the recent hard findings about what you're finding upwelling the West Coast?
So oceans everywhere are becoming more acidic. Over the last century, they have become 30% more acidic, which is quite a lot. It's not playing out equally every place. There are particular places in the world where it is becoming more acidic at a faster rate. And areas, for example, along the west coast of the United States, Washington, Oregon, California, where there is a phenomenon called upwelling, where water from the deep ocean is upwelled to the surface. Those are areas where the pH is changing, the indicator of level of acidity is changing the fastest. And so those are some of the communities at greatest risk.
And we've been reading that this acid can dissolve the shells, the tiny crustaceans, the base of the food chain. I mean, it sounds like it's the basis of everything.
Everything in the ocean that has a shell or a skeleton will be affected by the chemical changes underway in oceans because of the oceans having absorbed 30% of the carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere. And that is what's happening is that it's harder for critters to form shells or skeletons, and those shells or skeletons get eroded at a faster rate.
And why should the family in Kansas or Chicago worry about this? They live far from the ocean.
Everything in the oceans is affected, and so everything that people depend upon from oceans, whether it's the oxygen that we breathe or the fisheries that provide jobs and provide seafood that we want to eat, all of those are at risk.
Protein for an awful lot of the world.
1 billion people depend on seafood for their sole or primary source of protein. And that is, we don't know exactly how ocean acidification is going to affect fisheries. It's likely to have major impacts. And it is everything from the microscopic plants to the microscopic animals to the clams, oysters, mussels, sea stars, urchins, corals, all of those things that have shells or skeletons. As if that weren't bad enough, pH likely affects the physiological performance of many species in oceans, whether or not they have skeletons or hard parts. So it's every time we turn around, there are new studies about how the chemical changes that are associated with ocean acidification are problematic.
So this sounds like a fascinating science class. It no doubt goes into the science class parts of our brain that were formed when we were 8 and 10 and 12 and 14 years old. And that's very nice, and then we'll go off and have dinner and watch our favorite sitcom tonight and learn about David Letterman's latest. He's going to do another monologue tonight. We all understand about this.
Herein is the challenge.
Herein is the challenge.
Exactly right.
And I'm bringing it back here to the basic question. How do you break through in the communication? What is the role of the professional journalist? How do we divide up the blame, if we want to go the blame route of finding out whose responsibility is which? You as a scientist, now you as a government figure, ours as professional journalists, and perhaps some other part of society to get across is it just a matter of repeating it and continuing and staying with it until the critical mass finally joins up? Is that what we're after here?
I think that there's part of that, and I think we are social change is characterized by tipping points, and I think we do need to move faster and closer to those tipping points. But doing so is not necessarily doing more of what you have done. It's also doing things in different ways and fresh ways, and embracing social media. When you were doing our introduction, you were joking about all the different outlets now. Those offer some very important opportunities to communicate this information in new and fresh ways and to different audiences that may not have been focused on traditional print or radio.
Well, that's possibly a hopeful note when we put it against the unhopeful note of so many newspapers and other news organizations firing their science reporters, letting them go, not firing them, just letting them go because of the great downsizing that's going on all over the place. Is this going to be Is this gap going to be filled in, do you feel, by a new use of the internet, or is that just wishful thinking?
I can't answer that, Bill, and I think it's just really, what's happening in the world of journalism today is incredibly, I really worry about what's down the road, because we need, we need good, credible journalists that are doing what they should be doing, and doing the deep digging and the deep stories, and doing them in a way that's scientifically credible. And the folks who won the Grantham Prizes, we need that kind of coverage, and it's becoming increasingly difficult.